It is my great pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce a colleague, Dr. DeBrenna Agbenyiga. She's the Associate Dean for Graduate Students and Inclusion in the College of Social Science and Associate Professor in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies, as well as the School of Social Work at Michigan State University. In addition to her responsibility for graduate studies, she continues to lead the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Academic Affairs and serves as the college's Faculty Excellence Advocate. She has taught advanced graduate courses in community practice, essential theories for organization and community development, human behavior, and the social environment and social development and education. She has led study abroad courses, which she'll talk about later, in Ghana, Jamaica, and is a core faculty member in African Studies Center, the Center for Advanced Study of International Development, the Center for Gender and Global Context, the African American and African Studies programs, and the Research Consortium on Gender-Based Violence. So when we were putting together this program about diversity and inclusion, and we thought about a faculty member to kind of bring to highlight the great work Michigan State's doing, you can imagine we immediately thought of DeBrenna. So I just want to let you know real quick about her research-focused organizational culture, international social and economic development, community development and sustainability, women's rights, children's rights, gender-based violence, cross-cultural learning, and diversity. So right now I want to welcome DeBrenna Agbenyiga.
So can I move this? Good evening. First, let me begin by thanking all of you who are here and to Kellogg for actually giving us the opportunity to come and talk about diversity and inclusion. It is such a privilege for me to spend so much time at Michigan State University. For those of all of the alums, I was actually a student there and now have moved into these various roles. But what I must say about Michigan State University is that it is one of the places where you can really have the opportunity to embody and understand what diversity and inclusion means, but also then knowing that there's a great value in it as well. And you see it in so many different parts of the university. And I think we should know that that is just not by chance. And if you look back at President Hanna, who was actually the first chairperson for the Commission on Civil Rights, and that happened at Michigan State University. And you can see how that history has continued to move forward so people like myself can have an opportunity to be a part of Michigan State. Again, Michigan State, with this history of inclusion and being a part of social justice and human rights, Michigan State University was actually one of the first universities to divest from South Africa during apartheid. And that wasn't something that was easy for the university to do, but it actually demonstrates the kind of stance that we take at Michigan State University and what we embody and what we try to also instill in our students as well. So it wasn't by chance that once I completed my degrees that I continued to stay at Michigan State and serve in the various roles. As Nick said, my research actually has taken me around the world, and Michigan State has been very supportive in me doing that. I look a lot at gender-based violence and what that looks like in the U.S., how that impacts children and families, and then also looking at that globally and how can we learn from each other. And if it's one thing that I think I heard during the panel discussion is it isn't just about one particular group trying to discuss things and figure it out, but it's about sharing that information and us coming together around that understanding and creating various opportunities as well. And so as I move forward with doing my work, and as I said, I've worked in Ghana, in South Africa, in Tanzania, Nigeria, most of the places now that you were here where Ebola is, I've also been there as well, and we'll be going back. But I've also spent some time in Asia as well in doing my work. And it has been great because I begin to look at the laws and the policies and understanding how those really create sometimes social exclusion. And that's something that we have to think about. As much as we look at policies and we believe that they are being helpful, they do actually create that social exclusion. And so my work in the various communities is to be able to understand those exclusions. So I work with the various governments and with the non-governmental organizations as well. But what's so great about the work that I end up doing is that I don't do it by myself. I wouldn't even be able to stand here and say that I'm able to do the work that I do and have the interaction that I have because it's just all about me. But it's about the opportunities that Michigan State University allows me to have and the people that I actually have there as well.
Sorry. DeBrenna, talking about, following up a little bit on what you talked about, can you give us an actual example of work you did internationally to address civil rights?
Yes. When I look at civil rights issues, a lot of it, as I said, looks at gender-based violence and look at children, women, and families having access to health care, having access to food, having access to water, and the various resources that they need. And in many of the countries that I work in, that's not always very easy, and not everybody has that equal opportunity to have that kind of access. So for example, in Ghana, a few years ago when they were beginning to look at the policies and to put in place practices looking at gender-based violence and the impact on children, I worked with the governments there to begin to see how is it that we could really bring these laws into action. And they had been working for a number of years in various communities, but it wasn't coming together. Parliament was ready to vote on it, and it just wasn't passing, and they couldn't get community engagement. And so I was asked to come in to then figure out how is it that we could do this. And as much as I heard people talking about their culture and their tradition and their heritage today, I took them back to their culture, their heritage, and their tradition. And I went and I met with the Queen Mothers. Does anybody know what a Queen Mother is? Now, Queen Mother in some cultures, and especially throughout various tribal groups in Ghana, is actually a woman who is just as powerful as the king who is in power. And the Queen Mother is usually not the mother of the king, is usually the aunt of the king. And so that's all goes back into making sure if one person died, they're not killing out the family of a certain lineage. But the Queen Mothers are really the ones who are in the communities and they are the advocates. They are the activists in those communities. And once we were able to talk with the Queen Mothers and to talk about the diversity across the various tribal groups. So again, this is a way of beginning to understand, because when we talk about Africa, a lot of time we just say in Africa and over there in Africa. Or as we're talking about Ebola now, we're just saying West Africa. Well, Liberia is only one of the countries in West Africa. And there are two others that have been impacted. But West Africa has so many other countries. But there we would begin to talk about, across those tribal groups, what does gender-based violence look like, and how do we begin to address this within that cultural context. Once we were able to do that, it was really the Queen Mothers that we have to thank that we now have gender-based violence laws in Ghana that are protecting women, protecting families, and that we now see billboards that are written in English and in the 136 different languages that are spoken in this country, to get an understanding that, yes, we are diverse, but we need to be inclusive. And to be inclusive, we had to understand that there were differences as much as there were actually similarities when we're looking at this issue as well.
We talked a lot today, the comments, especially what Michigan State can do more, focused around study abroad, that international experience and the way to give our students experiential learning opportunities. Well, I'm going to ask DeBrenna to share her study abroad experiences internationally and the program that she set up for about 20 students. It's absolutely spectacular and a great example of what Michigan State can do to be a leader in this area.
So it actually did my heart very well to hear all of the alums talking about study abroad. I actually did not, like many of you said, I did not have the opportunity to participate in study abroad when I was an undergraduate student or when I was getting my master's degree. Some of it was financial, some of it was just the opportunity to be able to participate. But when I became a faculty member and my engagement around the globe, I knew that that was something I wanted to share with students at Michigan State. And as much as I've always been in an administrative role and a faculty role, and those of you who can imagine what that looks like is probably 10 times as difficult as what you're actually imagining. So I do spend a lot of my time in the administrative role, but I wanted students to have this opportunity. So I took the time to really create a program that wasn't about international, what I call international voyeurism. And we have a lot of those kinds of programs where you're on the bus, off of the bus, just looking at people and what they look like in their environment. Looking at people is not a part of understanding people and their situations and what they endure in a society. And so I designed a program that takes students for 6 weeks to Ghana, West Africa, and during that time we look at what we call social development education in their context. And when I designed the program, I set it up in a way where 95% of the readings for my course were written by Ghanaians. I wanted students to begin to understand how Ghanaians describe Ghana and their experience, and not how we from the outside interpret the experience of Ghanaians. And that has been very beneficial to the students. I usually admit my students by December, and to commit to my program, they actually have to write an essay. It isn't just about filling out the application. I want to know why you want to participate, why you want to understand this culture, how is it that you're going to use this new cultural awareness in your own professional development when you come back to Michigan State, how are you going to bring that back in the community in Michigan as well. During that time, they start their course with me actually in January, where they have to commit one Saturday each month to start setting the foundation of understanding these cultural differences. So we start reading about tribalhood and queen mothers. We start understanding fatherhood within the context of the Ghanaian people. We also begin to understand education as well. So by the time they get to Ghana, and we start with that 6 weeks, they have read so much that they get off of the plane and start pointing and saying, this is what we read about, and it all begins to come together the moment they step off of that plane. The assignments in my class isn't about them saying, how do you take what we do in the US and layer it into the Ghanaian context? I challenge my students to say, what is it that you have learned about the Ghanaian culture and the context and how they are doing their work? How can you bring that back to Michigan? And how can you implement that in East Lansing, in Grand Rapids, in Battle Creek, in Detroit, where we're looking at issues around equity in education, access to water, access to health care, because they're the same issues, but we do not have all of the answers here. But we can go someplace else and also look at how it is that they're beginning to address those issues as well.
Yeah, DeBrenna, you talked a little bit more about recruiting about 20 students. What are their majors? Are they all social work, psychology?
This is one of the programs, and what's so unique about it is that I'm one of the only programs at Michigan State that actually takes students at the undergrad, master's, and doctoral level. Most of our study abroad programs are really set up for undergraduate students. But I have a tier level where I have students at the undergraduate level. We're in the community, on the ground. Like I said, this is not voyeurism. We actually go and work with the community. I've been working with several communities for about 15 years now. They expect us to come. We work together to design what it is that we're going to do that particular year, and we build off of that each year in that community. I have students who come from social work, from human development, family studies, from the College of Business, from psychology, international relations, from James Madison. I have pre-med students, I have nursing students. I have a diverse array of students who come in, and what I do is I then ask them to fill out a bio of what it is that they would like to do, or what it is that they can bring to this program and to these communities. And then we send it back to the community partners, and that's how we design what we're going to be doing that particular summer within those communities. But it's a very diverse group that I take with me.
For questions real quick, so. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm just curious, because when you were talking about the voyeurism and you were talking about going into these environments, having an intention of learning something and taking it back, that really struck me, because I do have the impression that most times we are thinking about how can we go someplace and solve a problem with our great American wisdom, right? So, but sometimes we do need to go places to help solve a problem. and sometimes we're going to learn. And so I'm wondering how you decide when we're doing which, and how you engage those populations abroad to be receptive when we are trying to inspire some sort of change.
And that really goes back to, again, what the panel was actually discussing as well, is building that trust. And because we have a trusting relationship in the communities that I've been working in and with the organizations that I've worked with, we're able to have that kind of communication. So I can get an understanding of what they would like for us to bring, but then we also get an understanding of what it is that they can offer to us. For example, a few years ago, there was a situation. Ghana is one of the countries where they haven't signed The Hague. And The Hague is actually a document that's signed internationally where you can adopt children from various countries. Ghana has not signed The Hague, but people were actually adopting children from Ghana. So we were asked to come in to really start tracing this issue and helping them to address the fact that orphanages were going to the northern part of Ghana, taking children from, and the northern part is a not so highly educated area, so people were assuming they were sending their children down to the big city to get help, and not knowing that their children were then being sent to other parts of the world and being adopted. And so what we actually went in and did is we started tracing and documenting that, and we were able to document children being brought from the north and brought all the way back to a community in Massachusetts. I won't say exactly where, back to Massachusetts, illegally. Then we also noticed that there were a number of children who were being sexually violated, and they didn't have the skills, and they weren't trained in being able to interact and help these children understand how do you deal with being sexually violated and then being able to move forward. So I had students with me trained in that area myself, and so we trained the staff on how do you actually pick up the signs that children have been sexually abused, and then how do you help them when they begin to act out. So we created manuals to train the faculty. We trained them, and then we left manuals there with them. I had the same situation in one community I work, which is a fishing community in a heavily child labor area. And in that particular area, we had a number of children. Unlike in the U.S., if a child hasn't been to school and we discovered this and they're like in 4th grade, we would start them off and kind of build them up to 4th grade. Well, there, they were putting them right in a 4th grade classroom, so they were behind. So one of the things that we actually did was we worked with them on phonetics and how do you begin to teach language skills and math skills. And again, we created manuals. We did the training, we created manuals, so when we leave, the next group that comes in before we get back could help. So it's that kind of exchange that we're able to do that then I'm able to come in with my team to provide some of the skills that we have. But then what is it that my students learn? But then they learn how do you work with people in a different cultural context and become comfortable with working with individuals who do not look like you, who do not speak the same language that you do. And then they then learn those languages as well. But then they also learn those cultural pieces. And throughout that time, I make sure that they go to 4 different parts of the country. So they're interacting with 4 different ethnic groups during that period of time and learning 4 different languages and what childhood, marriage, what child right issues looks like across those various ethnic groups, because they are different.
All right, well, I guess I get to ask the next up.
So when you return these students,
Yes.
what is their feedback? Where do they go? What happens?
Great question. That's why I keep doing it, because it takes a large chunk of my time throughout the year and definitely during the summer. And sometimes I have to fly back and forth because I can't leave my office for the whole 6 weeks. But what happens is those undergraduate students who weren't even thinking about graduate school at all, or they're sophomores and had no idea, trying to figure out if I'm even going to complete my bachelor's degree, Most of my undergraduate students have continued into master's program. They come to me and say, I'm now interested in international development. I'm interested in cultural learning and awareness. I'm interested in how do I practice this in the various communities as well. So then I'm there writing letters of recommendation to get them into various graduate programs as well. For my master's level students, I've had a number of them who've gone off and worked in other countries. They've gotten their degrees and they've gone off to work in Europe and other parts of Africa and Asia as well, based on the work that they did in Ghana. And then my doctoral students have also continued and changed sometime their doctoral research. So they come back and totally reconceptualize what it is that they were actually going to do. A number of them have used this opportunity for when they get into faculty positions to go off and create programs like they have participated on with me. A number of my undergraduate students have been a part of my other research projects that I have in the US, as well as some of my other colleagues. So I have students now, one student who's in graduate school who's out in Detroit right now, looking at how do you save various languages that are at risk of being lost, and the cultural impact of these languages as well. I've had a number who've gone into community development work here in Battle Creek and Grand Rapids as well. So it does make a difference, and it has impacted them, but I still get emails from them. Just last week I got an email from a student who's in Chicago doing work, just completed her degree, and how she's now using that degree and that experience in Chicago.
I think one final question on the study abroad. Can you talk real quick about how the community embraced this program and Michigan State students coming to join them?
Well, they actually look for us. I'm contacted, like, we get back in July, August, and by September, I'm already being contacted by the various community groups. Are you coming back next year? Are you going to work in our community? What can we actually do? And that says a lot about the work that the students are doing. I don't want to say that I'm taking the credit for it, because they're the ones, when you sign up for my program, every single day they're in the community, Monday through Friday, they're getting up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, taking public transportation. I'm all about you being a part of the culture. So they're using public transportation, getting around just like everybody else, and spending most of the day in that community and working. So the community look for us, and we definitely appreciate and value what they give to us as well. And it really is an exchange, a very, what I call a mutual collaborative exchange that we actually have. And we can see that, as I say in the examples, with how our students actually utilize that while they're in the country, but then also how they come back and utilize that. What the feedback I get from faculty is that the different conversations that they have in the classroom that otherwise they probably would not have, and how that has enriched the discussion that they're able to have in there. And then, as I said, they go back to their organizations within the Lansing area, those that are doing placements, and they're taking what they've learned into those organizations as well.
Can you talk real quick about some of the research that you've done that has had an impact on West Michigan?
Yes. A number of my students, as I said, have actually been participating. They spend the time with me out of the country, and we do research there. But then a lot of my work is also done in looking at international populations here in Michigan. A big study that I had was looking at refugees. And one of the great things about Michigan is that Michigan is what we call a free case state in the refugee resettlement world. In other states, they're called anchor states, and that means people have to have a family member from their country here already established so they can come here. But with Michigan being free case, you do not have to have a family member. And that's great. That's wonderful that Michigan opens the doors to so many refugees who've been sitting in camps that's not a great place for years. However, it can be difficult, as we've talked about, being different and how do we acclimate in these various environments. It's very difficult for refugees to come in, learn the language, and then get their children in school, and then figure out what they're going to do economically about jobs and those things. So one of the studies that I have been doing for a number of years is looking at how do we resettle refugees in an effective way where they really do feel like they're a part of our community. And so it started off with looking at African refugees in Lansing and working with St. Vincent Catholic Charities. And it grew to Bethany Services and actually coming and looking at the Burmese population and those being resettled here in Battle Creek, and then also looking at refugees and human trafficking in Grand Rapids as well. And so my students have had the opportunity to be a part of all of those various research projects. And as I said, then they're able to use a lot of that to write their master thesis or to write their application to get into graduate school. But then they're also, what the big payoff is that they're able to talk about the experiences in our communities and how is it that we can make our communities better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone, by making sure people have equal access and opportunities, no matter where they come from, and have an opportunity to be a part of this great state.
Also, another large part of what you do is research and also education as well. Can you talk a little bit about the study you did around human trafficking in Michigan?
Yes. One of the things, and I'm so glad now that we are having a discussion, because probably about 6 years ago when I started looking at human trafficking in Michigan, most people thought we do not have that here in Michigan. It does not exist. And I don't know if you've heard, but at least in Michigan, in Lansing, they just broke up a human trafficking ring of about 3 adults who were actually trafficking young girls in the greater Lansing area. While I was doing my work in looking at refugees, I actually discovered a human trafficking ring in Grand Rapids. And they were actually bringing young girls in from Africa, taking away their passports, and then forcing them into various types of labor. And a lot of it was hair braiding. They weren't being paid. The idea was that they were paying back their trip to Michigan, which I've traveled from those various parts. We're talking about maybe $2,000, $2,500 at the most. It doesn't take you, and braiding hair, I know what that costs here in this country. It does not take you years to do that. But these women were being abused and being trafficked in through Grand Rapids. And then we've also found them in the Detroit area as well. And as I said, now they just broke up a ring in Lansing. And so I think when we think about diversity and inclusion, we can no longer say any of these issues are just happening over there. They're not happening here. They're not in our community. They are here. As I said, when I look at water rights, we have places in Flint where families are actually putting in money together, 3 families, to have water in one household so they can have access to water. So it is an issue that is happening here. We do have trafficking here, and that's something, again, that the students have an opportunity to be involved in, but it helps them to get away, as I said, that understanding that, oh, I need to go someplace else to study that because it's not happening here.
And I think that's what she talked about, where whenever she talks about we, what's impressive about the work that DeBrenna does is it's students, it's undergraduate students, it's graduate students, doing the research, finding out how to make change. And I give her a lot of credit for the work that she's done.
Thank you.
It's a really quick question, but what did you get your degrees in? Oh, no, it's okay. I was just wondering.
Okay, I actually did my undergraduate degree I was a pre-law student in criminal justice with a minor in sociology. And then I went into graduate studies because I got into community issues. I was heading to law school until I moved into this community, and during that time, the crack cocaine epidemic was really hitting African American communities where I was living. I got my degree from the University of South Carolina then. And it was at that time when I went to the School of Public Health and said, don't you see violence as a public health issue? And during that time, and it's not that long ago, but they really weren't looking at it as a public health issue. So I said, okay, I'll do a graduate certificate in alcohol and drug study, but I'm going to mobilize this community. That's when community policing was coming out, and the police really didn't know how to interact with the community. So I became the intermediary during that time while I was an undergraduate student working in that community and helping them to understand the issue and then to address that as well. I came to Michigan State and then got my master's degree in social work, and I'm trained as a macro social worker, so I look at organizations, systems, and communities. And From there, then I decided to do my PhD in social work with a concentration in family health and also in anthropology. And you would think after the PhD I would have been done. I am done now, outside of if Kellogg wants to hire me to come and be a taster or something like that and train me with that. That's about the only school I'm going to go for right now. But actually, just in May, I got my MBA.
Any other questions? Well, as you see, I've had the pleasure to work with DeBrenna for the last 6 years, and it's tough to say this, but she's what makes Michigan State great. I mean, just listening to her story and her passion and the impact that she has on the College of Social Science, Michigan State University. As we were preparing to do this presentation, she was pulling out emails and letters from former students just thanking her for the opportunity and the education that she gave. So if everyone, I wouldn't mind standing up and giving DeBrenna a round of applause.
Oh, thank you. No, I will thank you all. Because you either send your children, your nieces, nephews, somebody I hope I have an opportunity to work with. And I would like to say that the one thing I can say about Michigan State is Spartans not only will, they do. And that's why I'm able to do what I do. So thank you.
And thank you.